This is Miss Johnson. She's 29 years old and he's also single. One day, Miss Johnson fell in love and got married the next day. 2 days later, Mr. Smith and Mrs. Johnson had an argument and they broke up. The very next day, Miss Johnson walked to the park for a stroll. She saw a handsome young man named Mr. Williams. They fell in love and got married the next day. Unfortunately, after the wedding, Mr. Williams was hit by a car and died. One day, Miss Johnson was on the bus. She met a young man named Mr. Jones. They fell in love immediately, and Mr. Jones asked Miss Johnson to marry him. They traveled overseas and visited many beautiful places. They stayed at a romantic one-star hotel. 2 days later, Mrs. Johnson gave birth to a beautiful young boy. One day, Mrs. Johnson went to the supermarket to buy some milk for her baby. Unfortunately, on her way home, she was hit by a truck and died. Mr. Jones was very sad and cried for many days. 2 days later, Mr. Jones met a beautiful young woman named Miss Moore. They fell in love and immediately got engaged. The very next day, Miss Moore married Dave, and they lived happily ever after for the next 2 days. The end. This is a true story. Do we remember Mr. Smith? He was Miss Johnson's first husband. At the beginning of the story, Mr. Smith was single. What's another word for a single man? Bachelor. The stress is on the A. Bachelor. Is a bachelor a man or a woman? A man. Miss Johnson was also single at the beginning of the story. What's a similar word to describe a single woman? Bachelorette. The stress is on the second E. Bachelorette. So a bachelor is a single man and a bachelorette is a single woman. Are bachelor and bachelorette used to describe young or older people? They're used for both young and older people. In the past, they were used to describe only young single men and women. However, today they can also be used for older men and women. After Miss Johnson and Mr. Smith got married, they became husband and wife. What's another word for husband or wife? Spouse. The stress is on the O and U. Spouse. Is a spouse a man or a woman? It could be either a husband or a wife. If Miss Johnson and Mr. Smith were in a relationship but they were not married, can Miss Johnson still call Mr. Smith her spouse? No, a spouse is a husband or wife. In this case, if they weren't married, what would Miss Johnson call him? She could call him her boyfriend or her partner. Partner. The stress is on the A. Partner. However, when we think of the word partner, we usually think of a serious relationship. They have probably been in a relationship for a long time, and are likely to be living together. However, a partner can also be a spouse. So partner actually has two meanings. After Miss Johnson and Mr. Smith got married, they broke up. What's another word for break up? Divorce. Where is the stress in divorce? The stress is on the O, divorce. Miss Johnson and Mr. Smith divorced after their wedding. But if they broke up before their wedding, could we still say they divorced? No, only married people can divorce. Divorce can be the verb or the noun. Divorced is the adjective. When a married couple decide to get a divorce, this usually takes a long time. It could even take years. During this time, many people don't live together with their spouse anymore. What word do we use to describe people who are still married but not living together? Separated. The stress is on the first E, separated. If a husband needs to go overseas for a year for work, but the wife stays at home, would we describe them as separated? No, because they still want to stay married. When the husband returns home, he will continue living with his wife. Separated is the adjective. Separate is the verb. Do we remember Mr. Williams? He was Miss Johnson's second husband. When Mr. Williams died, Miss Johnson wasn't married anymore. What would we call her? Widow. The stress is on the I. Widow. Is a widow a man or a woman? A woman. What's the male version of a widow? Widower. The stress is on the I. Widower. The verb of widow and widower is widowed. Widowed is also the adjective. Widowed is used for both men and women. Do we remember Mr. Jones? He was Miss Johnson's third husband. After Miss Johnson became a widow, she married Mr. Jones. After she married Mr. Jones, could we still call her a widow? No, she's married now. The same would be true for a widower. When Mr. Jones asked Miss Johnson to marry him, what's another word to describe this action? Propose. Where's the stress in propose? The stress is on the second O. Propose. The noun of propose is proposal. After Mr. Jones proposed to Miss Johnson and she said yes, they won't be married until after their wedding. So between the time Miss Johnson said yes and their wedding, what word describes their relationship status? Engaged. The stress is on the A. Engaged. We usually use the verb get with engaged. For example, Miss Johnson and Mr. Jones got engaged. When Miss Johnson and Mr. Jones were still dating, Mr. Jones was Miss Johnson's boyfriend. But after they got engaged, what would Miss Johnson call him? Fiancé. The stress is on the A. We can also pronounce this as fiancé. In this case, the stress is on the E. Fiancé and fiancée are the two most common ways of pronouncing this word. However, there are also other ways of pronouncing it. Is a fiancé a man or a woman? A man. What do we call a woman who is engaged? Fiancé or fiancée. They are spelt differently but pronounced the same. What's another word for a relationship status? Marital status. The stress in marital is on the first A. Marital. The stress on status is on the A. Status. Also, we stress the word marital in marital status. What are some examples of a marital status? Common examples include single, married, divorced, separated, widowed, and engaged. These are adjectives and they are gender neutral, so they can be used for either men or women. When we are filling out forms, for example, driver's license forms, library card forms, or even mobile phone contracts, we often need to give our marital status. If you've enjoyed our video, please visit our website at umanzu.com to check out our latest videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button. And remember to like, comment and share our videos with your friends.